Today we're driving two Lexus GX 460s. The new 2020 GX 460 Luxury and my personal 2012 GX 460 Premium. They're both pretty similar spec, both have air suspension, the same 6-speed automatic transmission, the same 4.6 liter V8. Overall, not much of the running gear has changed on these two SUVs over the last decade. So, how do they compare? This one costs $72,000 with all of its options. MSRP is around $64,000. This one cost me $25,000. I bought it 121,000 miles. Right now it has 147,000 miles. It's got some scratches, it's got some use and wear and tear, but overall it's been a really reliable and fantastic vehicle to own for me. And personally, I think my GX looks better than the new one. That said though, this Terminator grille is pretty aggressive, and these new headlights do look pretty good. Let's walk you around these two cars and show you what they're like, and we'll take them on the road and compare. So you can see there's some new things if you're already familiar with this vehicle. We have a new 3-spoke steering wheel taken straight out of the Land Cruiser. They've updated some other things around here. Nice red leather seats. You've got some blacked out trim down here with your multi-terrain select and crawl control, transfer case controls, all that good stuff. This shifter I think is new for this year as well. The GX actually has usable cup holders now. This is probably the biggest improvement for the 2020 GX 460. And compare that to my 2012 cup holders. This is colossal. It's a really nice interior. The red stitching looks great. Everything is just nicely laid out. Lots of buttons, switches, knobs. These seats are supremely comfortable. This Luxury has the captain's chairs in the back, which are very nice. You can see the third row back there too. Though I will say the third row and these are a little bit cramped. This also has the rear seat infotainment. I mean, this GX is completely loaded up. Press cars are usually fully loaded and don't necessarily represent the usual specs people get them in, but this is an exception. You can see you also have rear climate control and just a very comfortable SUV. These are great on road trips. They are incredibly capable off-road. It's kind of the reliable Japanese Range Rover. Let's see how this compares to my 2012 over here. You can also see that this 2020 has the scarlet taillights, which is a really nice option, I think. I don't really care for the Altezza lights that they've been doing in recent years. My GX was before that time too. There's also some appearance packaging going on here where you've got some lower valences in the front and rear. And of course you get all the accessories back here, cargo nets, cargo covers, all that stuff. You can raise and lower the rear, the third row with these buttons. Of course you've got room for some tools in here as well as these pop out. You've got a first aid kit. Kind of a cool feature. And of course, as on all GX 460s, this rear window pops up, which is kind of nice to load things in quickly. And also if you need to put any large items out the back window, you can do that. Alright, so what has 8 years and 147,000 miles done to this GX? Well, I haven't cleaned it up, but it does clean up quite well. You can see my Lexus has a different steering wheel, and I will say I actually prefer this wheel to the wheel on the new car. It's just easier, it's more comfortable to hold, and the driving position feels like it's a little bit better. I can get it closer to myself as a driver, and I like that. The infotainment, aside from the color of everything, hasn't really changed that much. They've changed some of the menus and the design throughout, but overall it's pretty similar. These seats feel pretty much the same. Of course, you've got a different interior color. This isn't black like the 2020 that we have this week. And of course, we don't have some of the modern radar-guided cruise control, stuff like that. But we have all the same stuff. I've actually retrofitted multi-terrain select onto this car, but we still have the transfer case, the locking center diff, and I have the air suspension in my GX as well. And it's the original air suspension with 147,000 miles. It's held up and feels and drives really well. Of course, I also have these TRD wheels with slightly larger tires. Nice little upgrade that I think enhances the look and the flush fitment of the wheels. One of my biggest complaints with the GX has always been that the wheels look too inboard from the rest of the body lines, and the ground effects that they've added in some of these newer GXs really accentuate that. And I think these cars really need a slightly lower offset wheel with a little bit larger tire to really look good, and that's why I'm happy with the way mine looks. All right, let's take this for a drive. Let's start with the new 2020 because I know you guys are anxious to see that one, and we'll come back and pick up my 2012 here in a little bit. So, why do you buy a GX? These things have a huge following. There's a really big off-road community with them. They're mostly known as mall crawlers. But there's really an appeal to these trucks because they have this old school simplicity to them. They're body on frame. They're really well built. Probably one of the most reliable vehicles on sale today. And they can just go over anything. It's fantastic. They have really nice capabilities and excellent road manners. That's partially due to the KDSS, the dynamic sway bars that are hydraulic filled and can adjust under cornering or can allow for a lot of articulation in off-road scenarios. The air suspension in this rides very smooth, and as you can see here too, we have these new off-road modes and off-road cameras, which are not that high resolution, but I could see this being quite useful in an off-road situation. Also, you can easily turn on, so let's go to the transfer case here. We'll go to low. All right. And then if we turn crawl control, you can do your multi-terrain select here with the switch. If you turn crawl on, all right, you can hear in off-road situations you use this, but it basically eliminates the need for locking differentials because it allows each wheel to basically maintain the exact same speed. And I can't tell you how well it performs and how nice it is in an off-road environment where you're traction limited and you just need that extra grip and you need all four wheels to turn at the same speed. This new GX is just so quiet. It's so smooth. It really just effortlessly glides through and around town. It's pretty amazing, the level of refinement here. I can tell that they have changed the throttle programming a little bit with this newer GX. My 2012 has a little bit more of an aggressive tip-in, and it can be a little bit lurchy off the line. But this new GX is just so nice to drive. One advantage, too, to buying a GX over a 4Runner or even a Tacoma or an FJ Cruiser is that people have usually taken really good care of their GX 460s. They haven't off-roaded them. They've maintained them at Lexus dealers, and they're usually garaged. It's hard to find clean Toyota 4Runners, but clean GX 460s seem to be all over the place. The only thing you do have to watch out for is rust. I have had my 2012 rust-proofed the last few winters, and it did spend most of its life in Oklahoma. It's only been in Michigan for about 4 or 5 years. And it's holding up pretty well, but there is some surface rust underneath and all the steel body frame components. And so that's one thing. If you buy a new GX, definitely get it rust-proofed. I use Krown Rust Control, which is what the Canadians use, and it seems to be a pretty good way to go because it's a fine mist. Fantastic power from this 4.6 liter. It's a great sounding engine. It's super smooth. I mean, again, under-stressed, overbuilt. There's really not a lot of vehicles like this left on the road. The ride quality is fantastic. We have it in comfort mode. If you're going for sporty handling on a back road, you put it into sport, and it stiffens up the dampers just enough so that you actually get quite good handling. The steering feel on this GX is pretty nice. I did a 8,000 mile road trip in my 2012 a few years ago out to Glacier National Park and back, and oh man, it was so good on some of the mountain roads. I was really quite impressed. Of course, this new GX has radar guided cruise control. Seems to work as well as all the other Lexus and Toyota systems. It does have lane keep assist, but it's just a beep or a vibration from the steering wheel telling you that you've drifted out of your lane. Some nice new features. You do get, your tire pressure monitoring, some new information displays in the center cluster, like a speedometer, stuff like that. This infotainment, like I said, it's got everything you need, but you don't necessarily need to go in here for a lot of tasks. No Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, unfortunately, in these GXs. That is something I wish Toyota would add or be able to retrofit. I know a lot of owners have been able to put Apple CarPlay into their GX 470s, but I'm not really sure if there's anything yet for the 460. Let's throw it into sport mode here. Let's see how it handles an entrance ramp. This GX does have the new 19-inch wheels. So we've got a little bit narrower of a sidewall. Again, not amazing levels of grip, but for how big and heavy this thing is, it's actually pretty nimble. And I will say that is probably the biggest advantage to getting the GX over a Land Cruiser, is that this truck is just usable in more daily scenarios. You can drive this downtown and parallel park it in the city. You can navigate it around a grocery store parking lot, and it doesn't feel like it's too big. I mean, this is basically the same size as a 4Runner. It's the Land Cruiser Prado, and there's something to be said about that. And when I was considering and looking at these vehicles, that was a big factor because I really, really wanted a Land Cruiser or an LX 470, but it was just too massive. And even the newer Land Cruisers and newer LX 570s have confirmed that for me. So I think this is just a really, really nice middle ground. As you can hear here on the highway, very little wind noise, very little tire noise. I will say this Mark Levinson sound system is just one of the best. The sound quality is just fantastic. I will say, if you are getting a GX, try to get one with a Mark Levinson. It's well worth it. Really nice, crystal clear sound system. It's probably one of the better units that Lexus puts into their vehicles, and I think it's only about a $1,200 option, which is pretty reasonable. if you're buying new. And of course, you get all the luxuries. You get these really nice heated and cooled seat controls that are just sliders. You've got a heated steering wheel here on the left, as well as your headlamp washers and automatic bright lights. The ergonomics in the GX are fantastic. I have no complaints about the usability of this thing. Gas mileage, well, you should average about 17 miles to the gallon in the combined cycle. On road trips, I've gotten as much as 21 to 20 miles to the gallon in my GX 460, and I imagine these newer vehicles are just about the same. It does require premium. You probably could get away with using regular, but I wouldn't recommend it. One of the reasons why these GXs last so long and burn so clean is that they're designed to run on premium fuel, as are many other Lexus products. I think the off-road package in this new GX 460 is quite a nice option. It adds some pretty cool features. The air suspension does still only raise and lower the rear of the car instead of the whole vehicle, like the Land Cruiser or like the LX 570. But that's also a hydraulic system. It's not an air suspension system. It's interesting though, you look at a Jeep Wrangler that's 65 grand, and then you look at this and this is just so nice and so much better to drive on a daily basis. Yet it's still enjoyable and kind of fun to drive around. And it has just as much off-road capability except for the ground clearance. If you're really going to be doing some serious off-roading, this newer GX has a fuel tank, skid plate, but really you're going to want to go aftermarket and find some underbody protection and probably do a lift on your GX if you're really serious about going off-road. But at the same time, for my usage here in Michigan, I haven't had any need or lack of ground clearance in everything that I've taken my GX through. So honestly, these things do quite well stock and in standard form. And if you're really doing any hardcore off-roading, you're probably going to get a Jeep anyway. All right, let's go drive my 2012 and see how that does. They do smell similar, I'll tell you that much. All the controls are similar. The wood grain is different. You've got some different surfacing and materials here. But ultimately, they've changed aesthetic things in these GXs. Actually, I'm going to turn this screen off for now. And they haven't really done a whole lot to the bare bones. And the bare bones, the necessities, the basic architecture of this SUV is really why you buy it. So after I bought this 2012, pretty much all I did was I did fluid changes. I updated all the maintenance to whatever is required at the mileage. I assumed most fluids hadn't been changed, so I just went ahead and did everything. I also greased the drive shafts, the yokes, the U-joints, all that stuff. I did have a leaky sunroof, but that was just a drain that needed to be unplugged right here. Also needed to replace the spark plugs and just regular maintenance items, nothing major. Honestly, the rotors were a little bit there was uneven pad material on the rotor, so I just had those turned a couple weeks ago. But otherwise, the brakes on this GX have actually held up really well. It's not eating through OEM pads like I thought it would. This has been an exceptional daily driver and winter vehicle, road trip vehicle, taken out to the sand dunes. We've got lots of videos documenting my driving experience with this GX. There's just the same level of smoothness and refinement here. Of course, the newer 2020 feels new. It doesn't have any miles on it. But ultimately, I'm pretty happy with this considering that I paid a third of the price. And it's been just a fantastic overall vehicle. It honestly doesn't feel that much worse for wear, which is pretty amazing and pretty impressive. It does depend on how someone takes care of a car and how it's been driven and maintained. This GX 460 mostly saw highway miles, and if you are buying a GX or any used vehicle, I would recommend trying to find something with a lot of highway miles and usage out of the salt belt, which is what I found here, and I jumped on it. I looked at so many 4Runners, FJs, I was even considering Toyota Tacomas, and I just couldn't find anything that didn't have an excessive amount of rust on it. And this was pretty clean, and it stayed pretty clean, to be honest, throughout my ownership, because I've taken care of it. I've taken it to Krown once a year and then done touch-ups throughout those seasons, the beginning of winter, at the end of winter, and the early spring. And it's held up really quite well through a lot of winter driving. The visibility in this GX 460 is fantastic. I always like to put my little fisheye mirrors on everything that I drive. It pretty much eliminates my blind spots. But that's the thing with this GX, is it's a little bit old school. I mean, even the graphic for the phone, look at that. It's a flip phone. This was 2012. There were iPhones out at this time, and it's a Nokia from back in the day. And same with the 2020 with the updated infotainment. It's the same, similar type of graphic. I think they just updated it to look like a BlackBerry or something. We'll throw it into sport mode for whatever it's worth. The extra sidewall on these 17s, I'm running 255 70-17 tires, and they're about an inch larger than stock, but it gets the speedometer to the exact accurate mile per hour, and it's just a little bit more driving comfort. I also feel a little bit better about airing them down when I take this out to the dunes. I just love this thing though. I'm surprised. I never really understood or got the SUV craze until I bought this, and I really only bought it for the road trip because I knew my dad and I were going to do some off-roading, and just I also wanted something to kind of tackle Michigan potholes. And this has done a nice job with it. Power level still feels like the new GX. This thing pulls strong, it sounds good. There's maybe a little bit more tire noise than the stock tires on the new 2020, but overall it's pretty unnoticeable. You can can see here, I have retrofitted multi-terrain select, so you can just go in and select it through the steering wheel controls. You have a few options here, your gas mileage, but definitely not the same type of display as the new GX has. Personally though, I wouldn't mind saving 50 grand for a few little things here and there. Really the only downside to these GXs is they're a little bit expensive to fill up and run and fuel, but what you spend in gas you won't end up spending in maintenance. And there's a little bit of peace of mind to that. There's a comfort owning one of these things outside of warranty, and just an overall enjoyment factor to the level of quality that these GXs have been built to. Of course, one of my favorite things about this is it's one of the few modern vehicles where you can fully disable traction and stability control. So if you're on a little 2-track road, or you're in the winter and you want to have a little bit of fun, you just come to a stop, hold that button, and everything is off. And this is a rear biased full-time 4-wheel drive system. So it'll drift, which is fun. Well, there you go, guys. It's this is kind of an overview of these vehicles. I say that you kind of can't go wrong with whatever your budget allows. The more you spend, the more modern and nicer of a GX you're going to find. But at the same time, if you only want to swing 19, 20 grand, you can find some pretty decent examples out there with 100,000 miles. And they are not that much worse for wear, and you save a pretty large amount of money. And I have kind of a suspicion this GX has seen some pretty hard off-road use in its previous ownership. When I bought it, it took about 3-4 months for the dirt to kind of leave the back hatch. Every time it rained or every time I washed it, this thing was pretty dirty underneath, and I could see some little scratches from trail use and stuff like that. So I think this GX has really been used for its intended purpose, and I know I've put it through its paces in off-road environments. So to say that, it hasn't really necessarily been a pavement princess, and it still drives as well as it does, is just a testament to how great these vehicles are. One last thing that you will notice too is the approach angle on these 2012s is so much better and more off-road friendly than the lower bumpers on these newer GXs. You put a lift on these and it's pretty much a non-issue, but just something to think about, something to consider depending on how you're going to use this. I'm sure this is more aerodynamic and a little bit more fuel friendly, but yeah, it's whatever you prefer. It's been really interesting driving these two GXs when pretty much identical spec relative to their times. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This has been fun to compare these two. It definitely makes me kind kind of yearn for a newer GX that's a little bit maybe lower mileage and a little bit more buttoned together, but at the same time, I've really enjoyed this thing, and I'm probably gonna hold on to it for a little bit longer. And someday I'll buckle and get a RAV4 hybrid and something that's a little bit more fuel efficient. But until then, I really liked owning this thing. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Let me know if you have any questions, and also feel free to check out any of the videos that I've posted on this GX. There's a playlist on my channel page with all of the adventures in this 2012 GX 460. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.